Right. That's why the Bible says in Ecclesiasticus, they that love the Lord will never disobey his word.
Right, so he's quoting the Apocrypha there, and I just want to touch on the Apocrypha quick, right? So, I got a couple points here why we reject the Apocrypha, right? Point one is, well, if you have to go to the Apocrypha to prove your doctrine, then your doctrine is whack right off the bat, right? So that's point one. Point two is the New Testament never quotes the Apocryphal books as it was written, like it does with the other Old Testament books, right? And that's why the Old Testament, part of the reason why the Old Testament books are canon, right? The Apocrypha was written in the 400 silent years between the Old and New Testament, right? And then also the next point is the Apocrypha has always been rejected by the Jews, right? And the Jews were kind of like the keepers of the Old Testament, right? And they always rejected the Apocrypha as inspired, right? And that's what the Apocrypha actually means, is that's the literal meaning of the word Apocrypha, is doubtful authenticity, right? So that's that. And then one final note on the Apocrypha too is even if it was legit, it's part of the Old Testament, so we don't need it for salvation, right? Because the Old Covenant is obsolete. Amen. So and on that note, every doctrine that we keep, you guys, for salvation should come from the New Testament, because the Old Testament is obsolete. If you try to mix match them both, you'll end up all confused like these Black Hebrew Israelite dudes, right?
I want to give all the praises and the honor to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai Bahashem, Ruach HaKodesh, and double honors to the elder apostles, the elder bishops, and you other elders that is pushing this work and laboring in sincerity. And you brothers, honors to you brethren, you supporters to this truth, you prophets and supporters of this truth. Shalom to you sisters, shalom to the elect. So anyway, I want to go in this video with this guy, Dan Perrin. Finally, I get a video without a long intro, right? So I like the video because he went straight to the point of what he felt, why he didn't like the Apocrypha. I think he watched too many YouTube videos. He never really did full research, right? It was just another excuse to get rid of the Apocrypha. Now, he said you don't need the Old Testament to get salvation. But we see here in the book of Psalms, this is our inspiration right here, right? The prayer of Moses, the man of God, Lord, and that has been our dwelling place in all generations, right? I mean, you could read all of this. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thought hadst formed the earth and the world, even from the everlasting to the everlasting, through the art of God. So I don't get it, but maybe these Christians, they believe that the New Testament is salvation, when the Messiah quoted out of the Old Testament, he said, think not I come to destroy the law. He didn't die to destroy the law, right? This is what they're thinking, that now the law is in him, which it is, but through faith. So we still got to follow the Heavenly Father through his Son, through faith. But somehow this guy, these Christians are like Marcionianites, right? Marcinius, he was responsible for saying, I didn't want the Old Testament. That God of the Old Testament was evil. So let's focus on the New Testament. And that's what the Christians are doing. It's weird. All the information we need in the Bible. In fact, Paul and the Messiah, and there was very quotes out of the Old Testament into the New Testament. We'll get into that, but I want to also read a little more on Martin Luther. Martin Luther, when you look at the King James 1611, the time, let me read a little bit. I kind of know the history, but I'm going to read a little bit. It says in 1611, King James Version did indeed include the Apocrypha, including 1st and 2nd Maccabees, as a separate section between the Old and New Testaments. However, Martin Luther wasn't the one who removed it from the later editions. Right, true. But he was the forerunner of that. Luther did separate the Deuterocanonical books into distinct sections in his German Bible translation, right? Because he was a German monk. And I'm not going to go too deep in, all over the board for the history, but he didn't know how to translate that. He had such a problem. In fact, they had to go to school to learn Latin. So they had to omit a lot of that. This is why the book is not for Christians. In the latter days, the true men of the Lord will awake and will have the message and will be able to go into these old canonicals of books, right? Which canon means light, like your printer, right? And bring the truth out. Calling the Apocrypha and stating them that their books are not held equal to the sacred scriptures. So who gave him the right to say the books were not equal to the sacred scriptures? Well, the truth came out that he didn't know how to translate it. So even some of the translations in there, he got wrong, right? And yet are useful and good for reading, but he didn't remove them entirely, right? So it goes on. The later removals come from the publishings that omit to save the printing expenses. The British and Foreign Bible Society in 1804. You know who that was, right? We'll get into that too. Decided in 1826 to exclude the Apocrypha from the Bibles, right? So by the mid 1800s, most Protestant editions had dropped it entirely, right? Who was those Protestants? Those were the ones who did not want Negroes to be slaves. Negroes to be Christians, right? But the evangelicals, they're the ones that said they wrote a book on how to make a Negro a slave to make him docile. I just did a video on that, right? And this is why when Jake built those churches, it was funded by white evangelicals, right? The Protestant churches, which the Klan came out of, would burn those churches down. That's another video. So Luther did initiate the separation of the questioning of the canonical status. So let's go here, right? Remember the 1800s. I don't think I'm going to be able to read all this. It's a lot. Christianity generally emphasizes the relationship between the nature of God specifically. Let me go here. That was the wrong one. It says here, the slave Bible was created by the British missionaries, planters in the Caribbean, first published in 1807. Right? However, their names of the specific editions of authors are not mentioned in historical records. So, before we go further, let's go here and get Revelation 22 real quick. Remember, this book is really only for the Israelites, starting with the elect. That's it. This is why it was lost to us. And this is why now that we've awakened, we have that edition. Because we were asleep, it makes more sense now. No, we wouldn't have had it before because the Lord meant for us to stay asleep. Right, so it says, and I testify every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man shall add unto these things, God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And then if any man shall take away from the words of this prophecy, God will take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which were written in the book. So Esau was already mentioned not to even be written in the book or be part of this truth. You already, if you're the elect, you're already sealed, right? So anyway, so what we have is the slave Bible, right? So in the 1611, we had the Apocrypha. And then, as they say, Frank Cherry and them had dreams and visions or whatever they say. I did videos on that. We was already well known before the 1800s. We knew we was Israelites. But during the Bible crusade, destruction group who took the Bible out, they made sure they omitted not only the Apocrypha, but various other books. But let's go on. The full title was Select Paris of the Holy Bible for the use of the Negro slaves in Britain, West India, Islands, and it was an abbreviation version of the Bible specifically made for teaching pro-slavery version of Christianity to enslaved people in the British West Indies. And it's amazing that when I look at these YouTube channels, you got these, let me say, simps of the other nation who will put up these videos and say, well, Christians are automatically converted. It wasn't through slavery. How the hell in a time of slavery was anybody have a right to convert or do anything? There was no rights. You had to believe, right? They forced you to believe. And the ones who didn't, they were so scared and docile, they figured if they convert, their lives will be spared. That's why it says, when they would come, one of these Christians come up to you and say, are you saved in the Lord? That's what that was talking about. When you read the history on it, we were so stubborn and we fought against Christianity. If an owner came up and said, are you saved in the Lord? You would get whipped if you said no. So obviously everybody so-called converted, right? The motivations behind the creation was complex. Missionaries had to appease slave owners in the British West Indies who feared an uprising, which this fear heightened because of Haitian slaves. So, that's why I want to go into. This is why I want to bring it together. Because at that time, we had the Apocrypha, but they decided to take it out, starting with Martin Luther and various others, right? And then you had some that didn't even want the Old Testament. That's when they start introducing their universalism, which really goes back, way back in time. This is nothing new, how they was already, even our own people, was always enforcing holidays and so forth and so on. So my whole point is, by the time the 1500s came, the Apocrypha was in there, and it was not meant to be taken out. But King James, he kept it in there because it was already written. But the Roman Catholic Church, they didn't want that in there, and they kept it out. And then they decided to put it back. Some Bibles still have it. So anyway, let's go into. So I just wanted to touch on a little history on that. The fact that the Bible, it wasn't canonical because a lot of them German, not only him, not Eusebius, it was another one, can't quite remember his name, but they had him, I can't remember his name, Erasmus, I think his name was Erasmus, who also broke it down right on the Holy Trinity. It says it was the water and the blood and the Spirit. And then they said the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. And they got mad at him and he had to put it back. Remember, these are a lot of German scholars who some had things right and some things had it wrong. Right? Joel 2:32. This is in the Old Testament. And it shall come to pass that whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be delivered. For in Mount Zion in Jerusalem shall be deliverance, as the Lord hath said, and a remnant of whom the Lord shall call. The Old Testament was a basis foundation. That's why we go to Hebrews 10. Let's go to Hebrews 10 and 7. This is what it says. Then said, Lo, I come in the volume of the book. It is written of me to do the will, O God. So this goes back to the book of Psalms. Then I said, Lo, I come in the volume of the book. It's written of me. See, Paul and the Yahushua and the disciples, these quotes, men of the Lord in the Bible, these quotes, a lot of them came out of the Old Testament. He was just bringing it back to the Israelites who believed, right, the Jews, but he wanted to institute the faith in the Messiah because they were all practices of the law. So what Paul and let me say Yahushua did, he quoted things from the Old Testament, like this people speak sweetly with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. He put that in there, right? Quoting after the Father, because they're doing the same thing that they did according to the Old Testament. Anyway, that's what you see in Hebrews 10. Let's go to Romans 9:26. This is what Paul quoted. This is what Apostle Paul quoted, Romans 9:26. And it shall come to pass, let me talk to 25, as he saith at OC, which go to Hosea, I will call them my people, which were not my people, and my beloved, which were not my beloved. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living God. This also proves that Christians lack in prophecy. They have no idea what prophecy is. All they believe is in white Jesus with long stringy hair and a bed sheet and some Payless shoes on coming to save their ass. That's all they think. But when you go to Jeremiah 51, Isaiah 13, and various other places of the Bible, when it talks about Babylon, the daughter of Babylon, Isaiah 47:1, when it says, come down and sit in the dust, ye virgin daughter of Babylon. You know, these prophecies, that's why we're the prophets. And you Christians, you're not prophets. You have no idea what's going on with the Bible, and you don't need the Apocrypha because it ain't for you. Right? So let's go back here. Romans 9:26 to prove it. It says in Hosea 1:10, as he said in OC, yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered. And it shall come to pass in the place where it was said unto them, ye are not my people, there shall be said unto them, ye are the sons of the living power. So when we go back to Romans 9:25, and we jump on down to 27, it says, Isaiah, which goes to Isaiah, also cried concerning Israel, though the number of the children of Israel be the sand of the sea, which a remnant shall be saved. Now what do we see in there? Let me go down here. A remnant shall be saved. Let me go up here. It's various other examples. For he will finish the work and cut it short in righteousness, because a short work will the Lord make upon the upon the earth. Now when you read Romans 15:7, let me go there. I think it's 15. I forgot which verse it is. It's 15:7 or 27. I think it's 27. 3, 4, 4. For whatsoever thing are written aforetime were written for our learning, that through patience and comfort of the scriptures we might have hope. So we can also, it's so many scriptures. Oh boy, we can go into what I read before, as he said also Isaiah have said, that actually quotes to Isaiah 10. That goes to Isaiah 10. Let me see if I can get that real quick. Isaiah 10. And is it 10? Let me see. We go through this so much. Let me see where I'm at. Yep. 10:20. And it shall come to pass in that day that a remnant of Israel that are set escaped the house of Jacob shall no more stay upon him that smote them, right? But shall stay upon the Lord, the Holy One of Israel in truth. So now what I want to do is jump to the Maccabees, which even the New Testament does mention parts out of the Maccabees, like certain things like the holy days. So, and with Yahushua, they say Yahushua, what you call Jesus, is not mentioned in there, but there was things of him mentioning, being mentioned of the days, the holy days that he followed. So when we go to First Maccabees, right? Alexander, the son of Philip, Macedonia, of the land of Kittim, who had defeated King Darius, Persia. Basically, if you read the story, he conquered that part of the Western known world. And then what he did, I'm just trying to scroll through to give you the insight. He had his generals, which was more than 4. You had Antiochus and some others, but mainly Ptolemy, Lysimachus, I think, Cassandrus, and Seleucus. And then when you go on down, Antiochus, Epiphanes, king of Antiochus, it says he came out of the root, right? Rome, he had been a hostage in Rome. He began to reign 137 years of the kingdom of the Greeks. Okay, in those days, certain renegades came out from Israel. So really, when you get to this story, this also talks about Antiochus in Egypt. When Antiochus saw the kingdom was established, he determined to become king of the land of Egypt, right? Just like Ptolemy, the Ptolemaic Empire, who also conquered Egypt. So you see that this is how it's going. And then you go on down here, talks about the persecution of the Jews, right? I'll just go through a little bit. This is another translation, but you get the point. On every side of the sanctuary, they said innocent blood. They even defiled the sanctuary because them of the residents of Jerusalem fled. She became a dwelling of the strangers, right? And in this verse, it just talks about how it says many even from Israel gladly adopted the religion. They sacrificed to idols and profaned the Sabbath. And the king sent letters by messengers to Jerusalem and the towns of Judah, and he directed them to follow customs strange to the land, right? This man hung children, women. He did all kind of wickedness. So this shows you that the transatlantic slave trade had to be us, because they did the same thing to us then. Just like in the time when the Syrian woman ate in Syria, when the Israelite woman ate her child. When you go up to 70 AD, the same similarities. Even the yokes of iron in Babylon, and you see it, similarities. You see the same thing here. This is our history of what happened to us, and why Paul had to try to bring us and convert us back, because we became strange. That was that wild olive tree that was broken off. It had to be a part of it to be broken off. It's another video, but let me get this real quick. Hebrews 8:10 before I close. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days. So this is all relevant to the Old Testament. It says it over here in Jeremiah 31, by the way. Same thing. This is all quoted from the Old Testament. It's crazy for a Christian to say the Old Testament don't matter. That's weird. You other Christians, you ought to have this man sanctioned and fired. He ought to be penalized. Saith the Lord, I will put my laws in their mind and write them in their heart. And I will be to them a God, and they shall be to me a people. This says, for this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel. Period. You just can't come. See how they say we pick and choose, but they come, and because they see this, and also says it in Jeremiah 31 and 33, and then they say, oh, well, if you're a believer, then you are the seed of Abraham. No, the reason why the Messiah said that, because they was boasting all about the law and claiming the seed of Abraham was going to save them. No, he said, if you believe on me, then you are the seed of Abraham, meaning then you will be saved. It's simple, man. These Christians, they kind of go up to the wrong people to try and debate, or weak Christians, or weak Hebrew Israelites. I don't know.